Thank you, Dr. McCamey, for that wonderful introduction. It is my distinct pleasure to be with you this afternoon and to share with you in your first live conference. And this is just magnificent. As I listened at some of the beginning presentations today, I was just totally with a proud chest for the outstanding work that you are doing and that I know you will continue to do as you move forward. So today I'm going to share with you a few comments, some of my thoughts about your theme, which is changing the game and forging new path. I was impressed by that because for me, it is action-oriented, and action is what we need right now. So today, we are assembled in a museum named for Reginald Lewis, who was one of the first African-American billionaires. He was also a strong civil rights fighter. A recently released book entitled Waging a Good War, A Military History of the Civil Rights Movement, uses the vocabulary of war to talk about the civil rights movement. And in this book, the author, Thomas Ricks, identifies the Montgomery bus boycott as primarily defensive because it was a withdrawal of patronage. And then he talks about the Nashville sit-ins as being offensive because they were demands for service. I submit to you that a civil rights movement still exists today, but it has taken a new form and a different form. The movement today addresses many of the familiar causes that have been made necessary by the endurance of systemic racism. And I'm going to just say right now that we're not going to talk about the racism today because we all know it exists. We're going to put that one aside. But then we're going to talk about the success elements of social movements. Now, when we think about the civil rights movement, there have been collaborations between some of the Black Lives Matter movement who've gone to some of those leaders to help them think about their strategy. And when we hear John Lewis's statement about get into good trouble, that means being persistent in moving forward day by day while keeping control over your emotions as well as your fears for the greater good. Now, we often hear about Rosa Parks, and we think that Rosa Parks was this little lady who was leaving work on the bus and decided that she just wasn't going to get up that day and give up her seat to the white man as she was being directed to do by the bus driver. Now, what we don't hear oftentimes is that that was a planned, strategic, tactical move by the civil rights movement. Rosa Parks had been going to classes. She had gone to training sessions in terms of how to be nonviolent and to know how to respond. So when the day came and Rosa Parks had been selected as the person to execute that strategy, there was another person who had had a similar experience, but the movement had made a decision that Rosa Parks was the best person because of her standing in the community, and they knew that they would be able to mobilize the movement. So whenever you're thinking about a good war, strategy and tactics are equally important. And strategy means understanding who you are and what your goals are. And then you develop tactical plans that will allow you to fit the approach and accomplish those goals. What we have learned over time in terms of successful social movements is that there are some key elements for success, and they are strategy, training, discipline, support structures, and then finding the way forward. So I'm going to talk with you about those elements and relate them to where we are now and the work that you are engaged in. The strategy for DNPs of color is clearly articulated in the mission and vision statement of the organization. And that vision is to inspire, empower, and transform the landscape of nursing by increasing diversity in doctoral nursing practice. There are three broad objectives for the organization that frame the tactics that you're going to be using. And they are to create opportunities for engagement in academia, research, and clinical practice, to advocate for educational support for DNPs of color, and to serve as mentors and guide nurses of color to pursue doctoral nursing practice studies. So that's your strategy. And you've got a frame for the tactics already clearly articulated. So now the second element for success in social movements is training. You in this room, all of you, are among the most highly educated individuals in nursing profession. I don't know if you recognize that or not, but let me tell you why I say that. When we look at data from the Future of Nursing Report, and you guys are familiar with the Future of Nursing Report 2020-2030, what that report indicated was that the increase in educational attainment has been particularly strong among persons of color. And as a matter of fact, the percentage of nurses of color who have earned the BSN degree was much higher in comparison to whites. That's number one. Second, proportionally, more nurses of color have a master's degree or a DNP or a PhD in nursing. Did you know that? Look at the data. Now, I'm not saying absolute numbers, I'm talking about proportionally. That's what we look like, and that is who we are. And when we look at data from the American Association of Colleges of Nursing, it shows that between 2010 and 2017, the number of nurses earning doctorate degrees really did balloon. Among white nurses, the number of DNP graduates had increased from 982 in 2010 to 4,100 in 2017. That was a 3,000% increase. The proportionate number of nurses of color earning the degree was even greater. The number of Black African American nurses who obtained the DNP degree increased from 139 in 2010 to 826 in 2017. That is a 5,000% increase. The number of Black African American nurses earning the PhD increased from 52 to 107, and that was a 105% increase. So when I look at those numbers, I say, wow, we're pretty smart. You know, we do this, we get this. The next question that comes to my mind is, why are we not showing up in those leadership positions? What's going on there? All right? In 2011, the Institute for Diversity in Health Management conducted a national survey of hospitals across the United States to determine what steps hospitals were taking to reduce healthcare disparities and to promote diversity in leadership and governance. The findings from this survey indicated that while minorities represented 29% of the patient population, minorities only represented 14% of the positions on hospital boards, 14% in executive leadership positions, and 15% in first and mid-level management. A big discrepancy, right? And then when we look at, again, data from AACN, we see that the number of deans of color had increased from 8.9% in 2010 to 12.3% in 2020. Also in 2020, 78.8% of nursing school faculty were white. So, minority nurses often face barriers to professional advancement, and that includes discrimination, marginalization, and fewer opportunities for promotion. So, where are you along that spectrum? And what are your goals and desires for leadership position? And how are you going to reach them and get your foot in the door so that you can push it wide open for others to follow? Because that's what we've got to do. Nursing leaders of color need to develop best practices to recruit, retain, and mentor a more diverse workforce so that we can deliver more culturally appropriate care. One of the things that you might do is to seek out and assess professional development opportunities wherever you work or wherever you're positioned or wherever you network. When we look at a recent research study in the Journal of Diversity in Higher Education, some of the factors that led to faculty moving into leadership positions in the university included a couple of things. Number one, intentionally a desire to increase representation. Second, role modeling and mentoring. Third, learning to leverage our professional networks, and that includes churches, that includes community organizations, that includes your sororities, your fraternities, any way that you are able to leverage and increase your social capital. Then having and holding a desire for what it is that you want to do, and taking advantage of formal leadership development opportunities and programs. I see a couple of folk here who participated in the Diversity Leadership Institute, and I'm so proud of you, and now you can go out and spread that word. Now, the third element for success social movement is discipline. And if you think about the civil rights movement, that was a pretty disciplined group. Very disciplined. And that came with training. That just was not accidental. And when I make reference to discipline in this context, I'm wanting to focus on the skills that enable and maximize leaders in their own performance and in their ability to influence others. And this is in alignment with the definition of emotional intelligence as set forth by Daniel Coleman. And what are those skills? Self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, having a desire to win, empathy, understanding people, and social skills, the ability to build rapport with others. Those are the skills. So how can you think about changing the game? A couple of things. Take perspective of your organization. What are your patients saying? What are your clients saying? What are your students saying? And then collect some data about what's going on in your organization and disaggregate that data and benchmark the data. Think about how you might be able to influence actions that are moving forward within your organization and for members of your team. Focus in on the culture and the climate of your organization. And most importantly, really focus on those things that you're going to be able to control. Your behavior should align with your personal values and hopefully with those of your organization. Discipline is also learning to be resilient. Now, the fourth element for success is support structures. Reginald Lewis was not marching on the protest lines. He was not sitting at the lunch counters in Nashville. But what he did, he had money, and he contributed financial support. He was a lawyer, so he was able to bring legal skills and know-how when that was necessary for the movement. So it's necessary that you build coalitions. You identify who your stakeholders are, and you know who can make connections for you, who can open the doors for you, and that stands for individually as well as for your organization. And your CEO knows all about finding those support systems. So learn to communicate with your stakeholders so that you can build trust and support. Now, the fifth element for success in social movements is planning. And for this one, I'm going to tell you a story. And this is a story about my mom. About 10 years ago, my mom passed away at the age of 93. And during one of my last visits with her, because in the last years of her life, we had to have her placed in a nursing home because of her progressive osteoporosis. And on one of my last visits with my mom, we were sitting outside on the veranda, and it was a nice, beautiful fall day, similar to today. And we were just sitting there, and we were chatting, and then all of a sudden, Mom got really quiet. I thought she had, dozed off, taking a little nap. And then out of the clear blue, she looks at me and she says, "Baby, you don't cross the bridge when you get to it. You cross the bridge before you get there." And I just said, "Yes, ma'am." I wasn't really trying to understand or think much deeply about that. And it wasn't until some time later that after I'd come back home and I was thinking about it, I said, wow, how profound yet simple that is. You've got to plan, visualize, and do it in your mind before you can execute it. And that's what planning is really all about. And I always carry that with me because I thought, that's it, Josie, you hit it about right. So planning for you is what? What are your goals? What are you hoping to see? Can you visualize it in your mind so that when the time comes, you cross that bridge as you're there? So that's planning. And then the last part is having a way forward, because the end game is all about changing the system so that at the end, hopefully, we can all learn to live together across our differences. So the healthcare system in the United States is undergoing some major health transformation. And nurses, as the largest segment of the healthcare workforce, are able to contribute and lead that transformation. And I have no doubt in my mind that you are capable of leading that transformation. It's going to require an enhanced set of knowledge and skills, which you possess. It's going to require that you have an understanding of population health and wellness, and I think you get that. I think you really get it. It's going to require understanding of some of the technological changes that are taking place in healthcare. And all of this together is going to constitute the nursing workforce of the future. As nurses, you have potential impact on the lives of others because you see them when they are most vulnerable. And you are able to impact the health of our nation, and it comes with great responsibility and accountability. We must address unjust systems and structures as we continue to model our profession's commitment to social justice and health. Our world needs leaders who are going to be able to make their way out of chaos and find opportunity. The challenge of healthcare providers will be moving from volatility to vision, from uncertainty to understanding, and from complexity to clarity. So get clear about your strategy and your tactics, understanding where you want to go and what values will guide you. Remember, the secret of success is not to live your life always worried because you might make a mistake. You inevitably will make mistakes. And look at them as proof that you're not living a safe and secure life, but instead you are working to explore your fullest possibilities. Excellence comes from individuals who take risk, who have a willingness to experiment, and to engage others in the search for excellence. Occasionally, you will need to take some risk, and you will need to do something that is scary. Thank you.